Let's shift the paradigm to prioritize our peace and focus on the positive while creating balance to make living our best life the ultimate goal. We'll talk boundaries, self-care, mental health, and overcoming obstacles. You'll hear interviews and fresh perspectives to support you along the way. Let's elevate the conversation and level up our self-growth game. This is the Piece of Me podcast. Imagine being able to quit your career to follow a passion. Imagine being a mom of two, quitting your six-figure salary career, and having a partner that supports your decision. Now imagine leaving your corporate career and your decision goes viral. And by viral, I mean people from Good Morning America, Scary Mommy, and Inside Edition reaching out and wanting you to be on their show. That's what happened to my guest, Kym Summers, over a year ago. Now, Kym decided to step away from her successful career to write a book. She called it her midlife gap year because she was in her early 40s. Now, if this story sounds familiar, you might recall hearing it here on the Piece of Me podcast in episode 25. If you haven't listened to her story, go back and listen to episode 25 so you're all caught up. A year ago, she was fresh out of the working world, and she was just starting to write her book and live her midlife gap year. Hi, friends, it's Lexy Lee. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not, then welcome back. And thanks so much for coming back to the podcast. Before we listen to today's episode, I want to let you know that Free Coffee Fridays are returning to the podcast for the month of May. I've partnered with my friends at JavaSock again to give you a cold cup koozie and a free coffee on me. Now, JavaSock has released a new design called Self-Love, and it was just so fitting with the Piece of Me podcast that I knew we had to give these away to a handful of lucky listeners. To see the new JavaSock design, come on over to the Piece of Me podcast on Instagram, and I'll be sharing all the self-love design in detail so you can check it out. JavaSock sleeves are great for iced coffee, summer cocktails, lemonade, or whatever cold beverage you enjoy drinking. The code word coffee is what you'll need for each weekly giveaway. So make sure you're listening to the Piece of Me podcast for your chance to win just for listening, just for being here and enjoying the show. Lastly, hit the follow button on whichever podcast platform you're listening to right now, so you'll know when a new episode is out and for a new chance to win that week's free Coffee Friday giveaway. Now, I'm really excited to bring Kym back on the show to give us an update on what she did over the last 12 months. We'll find out if she finished writing her book, what she's been up to, if she's had any regrets from those decisions that she made a year ago, and the unexpected changes that happened in her personal life along the way. Now, I've been following Kym on Instagram over the last year to see all the things she's been up to. And I'll make sure to link all of Kym's socials in the show notes below so that you can connect with her too. Now, we get into a lot in this episode, so get cozy and enjoy this conversation. Hi, Kym. Welcome back to the Piece of Me podcast.
Hello. Thank you. It's great to be talking with you again.
It's so great to see you. It's been, I think, over a year now that we've had you back on the podcast rather. So it's nice to have you back and hear all the wonderful things that you've been up to. So we're going to get right into it.
Great.
Now, it has been a year since we've had you on the show, give or take. So tell us about kind of going back to this viral decision that you made to take this midlife gap year. What was it and how did you make it happen?
Yes, I'll give you a little recap for listeners that didn't hear me on the first time a year ago. In early 2023, I quit my job to take a year off to explore how I could reimagine my life. And I didn't plan this in advance, but I did happen to record a TikTok on my first day of unemployment proclaiming my midlife gap year. And it caught the attention of a journalist who wrote a story about it. And then it spiraled into a lot more media outlets picking it up, and ended with a segment of me on Good Morning America, which I think is how you found me. And a very unexpected turn of events, but kind of fun actually to sort of plant my flag in it and really proclaim what I was doing for the year. And I think when most people think of a gap year, they imagine like a recent high school or a college grad traveling or just taking a break and trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. And honestly, I wanted in on that. I think it was a little unconventional because I was in my early 40s and my life was pretty dialed in. I was on the executive leadership team of a really successful consulting firm. I had a pretty big responsibility, or a lot of departments that I was responsible for in the company, basically running operations, and I was managing all the acquisitions that we were making. I was making a very good paycheck, 6 figures, and it was like, check, check, check. Like I hit all the goalposts that you set out to be like a successful person in America. But the idea that I was just going to continue down the path for the next 25 years or so until I retired was just incredibly unappealing. And, it was all like fine. I did not hate my job. I really didn't. It was just fine. It wasn't bad. It was fine. And when you've worked for 2 decades towards a certain level, it's like, am I really going to start over? And an important part of the backstory is that my company was owned by a private equity firm, and they had been pretty open about their intention to sell us in like 2022, 2023. And so I had started in like 2020, basically like around the same time of COVID. I started to dream about this idea of taking a break after we were sold. And when COVID hit, it was really a proof that we could live on a lot less. We weren't traveling, we weren't eating out, and just generally speaking, we were just like spending less money because we weren't out in the world. And so we started to make a plan on how to enable a career break that would coincide around the time that our company would sell. I figured that would just be like a really natural break. And my husband was really supportive. I had been the breadwinner for most of our marriage, and we had made a lot of smart investments and we'd saved money. And he was just overall very encouraging about me taking my foot off of the gas for a while. But then the private equity firm's plans changed, and they told us, the leadership team, that it was going to be at least 3 more years before they were going to sell us. But by then, I was just so invested in the idea of a career break, I could not wait that long. And so I just got much more intentional about the timing and very aggressive with saving.
That is so cool. And I love that. And I remember the first time that we talked about this, because I'm always, I don't know, I guess like inspired by people who, you knew what you were feeling, what you were thinking, you would plan for this. And that's such a hard thing to do. Like you said, you're the breadwinner, you had a very successful career, you're doing really well, you have children too. I mean, there's all this stuff that's going on. There's so many factors to consider. And to take, a risk and to do something different or to pivot and change paths like that, that's tough, but it's so cool. I think a lot of people dream of that. I think a lot of people wish or hope, man, maybe one day, But to your point, to possibly stop and then go, well, what am I going to do next if I do change a path, when you're in your 40s or whatever you might be? That can be really scary. So I've always loved your story. I'm all about, I just think it's so cool. That's why it's so great to have you back here and talking a little bit more, especially now that we get to go into all the fun stuff you did.
I know what actually happened.
Yeah. Like what really happened.
Yeah, completely. Well, and one thing I'll just say about that point is that I just think that oftentimes we do have these little notions of dreaming big. What if, but very few of us will take it to that next level and say like, well, how might I actually, I like go from what if to how might I do that? What would my life look like? How could I get there? And I think that, oftentimes, especially when you consider big change, I think it's just a human reaction that we think, oh, scary, big, money, impact. And we just hear and feel these like no's and stop signs everywhere we go. And I think if you can just push past that point and just be in the hypothetical and allow yourself to really think and plan about what it could look like, it doesn't mean you have to do it, but just think about it. You can really like allow your mind to get into this playful space of dreaming in this different reality. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes if you can stay in that space long enough, it starts to feel possible.
That's such good advice. Yeah. So instead of thinking, what if, think about how might I, and just let your mind go through the path. Like just figure it out. And if you don't do it, you don't do it. But there's nothing wrong with just letting yourself kind of daydream or walk through the plan. I think that's great advice. I love that. So let's get into what your midlife gap year actually was. So tell us about what you've been up to since we last spoke to you.
Oh my gosh, Lexy, so much. I could never have imagined where I would be when we talked a year ago. I'm sure that there would have been a lot of good going into a year like this without a plan, where you think, I'm just going to take a break. I'm going to rest. I'm going to let things come together. But But honestly, that is not my personality. I did have several like amorphous goals that were like slow down and rest more, walk the dogs, do more yoga, don't check your email every 5 minutes, be more present with my children. But you can't really measure those. You can't say like, am I slower? And it's sort of more of a feeling of like, what did I want my life to feel like? And those were fine, but that's not really a plan. But I did have one big tangible goal, and that was to write a book. I had been longing to be an author since I was a teenager, and I had never taken any real action towards it. And in the recent years, in the years before I took my midlife gap year, I'd been developing a plot idea for a novel. And I kept saying, okay, I'm going to start writing just a little bit. In fact, I made a vision board one year where I wrote 10 minutes a day. And I had this title of the book in my mind and put out all these pictures of things that inspired me about what my book was about. And I was like, I'm going to write 10 minutes a day. And I did it one day. And that was it the entire year. And so then I thought, okay, maybe once a week or maybe freaking once a month, set aside one day and write for 1 hour. And I just never did it. I was so overwhelmed with the idea of writing an entire book that I couldn't even sit down and write 100 words towards it. It felt so big and so insurmountable. So I vowed that with this time off, that this would be the year that I would finally write it. And I did.
That is so cool. So the book is finished?
The book is finished. Yes, the book is finished.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. So now how long did it actually take in that year? Did it take the full 12 months or?
No, it did not. And that was actually kind of a surprise. It only took about 3.5 months to write the book. And, once I started researching, okay, just break it down. How long does a book have to be? I was writing a thriller. So I was like, it has to be at least 75,000 words. So I thought, okay, well, how much do I have to write every day to get 75,000 words written by, and I set a deadline for myself, mid-June. And it was 1,000 words a day, 5 days a week for 3.5 months. And it's kind of, it was just so shocking when I sat and looked at the spreadsheet and I was like, that's it? That's all I got to do? Okay, let's do it.
Seems doable at that point when you break it down like that. Yeah.
Completely.
Wow, no kidding. So 3.5 months. Yeah, that's really amazing.
Yeah.
And did you find yourself, even when you were sitting down to work on it, did you find yourself easily distracted, or was it because that was what you were trying to do? It was easier to just kind of stay on task and just get it done?
Yeah, that's a good question. On some days I would sit down to write my 1,000 words and I would start doing something else and I would get distracted. And generally once I started, I would do it, but it was a matter of just getting the momentum and getting started, opening up that Word document and getting the words down. But I'll tell you, what I stayed accountable to was the weekly goal. So I did not let a week go by without finishing my 5,000 words. Sometimes that meant that I was writing 3,500 words on a Sunday, but that was okay with me. I mean, I had the time and that was, for me, that discipline was very important because I know that I am the kind of person that once I start letting myself slip on my goals, then I'll just start making excuses and I won't be able to reel it back in.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That totally makes sense. So how did you even start? I mean, you kind of just said that you have these smaller goals that you set for yourself. This was a dream of yours since you were a teenager, but how did you actually get going?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I'm going to give some kind of insane advice right now because one thing I have learned, because I've been very vocal about my desire and my process of writing a book this year, that I would say most people I talk to say, I've always wanted to write a book. And so there's no way that there's not a good portion of your listeners who do not feel like they have a book in them, whether it's a fiction book or a nonfiction or a memoir or some kind of self-help or just something that they want to share with the world. So I'm going to give some kind of insane advice. And that is that I highly recommend knowing as little as possible about the craft of writing and the business of publishing before you start writing a draft of the book. If I had known what I know now, I would have been too intimidated to start. And so if you are out there and you're thinking, I want to write a book too, but I haven't done X, there's always that thing that you think, I have to have this thing that makes me credible enough to take this action. Don't go and take a creative writing class. Don't go and get an MFA. Don't go and read a bunch of books about plot beats. Just write it. Just write it. And the reason that I have this advice is because I wrote what actually at the time, okay, when I finished my draft, I thought, oh my God, this book is perfect. This book is so good. Like, I don't even think it needs hardly any editing. Like, it's just a masterpiece. I really felt just so overly confident. And
Nothing
then
wrong with that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Actually, I'm very glad. And actually, I will be forever grateful for that blind optimism because I'll never have it again. Honestly, I think you don't get it once you know about how to make a book better. It's hard for you to write a book poorly, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I just think the other thing that's a little bit magical about being a first-time writer is that oftentimes it's a story that has been percolating in your brain for a long time. So if you can actually sit down and write it, I think you'll find that the words and the story really just pour out.
Mm-hmm.
So when I wrote that first draft, at the same time, I started listening to podcasts about writing. I was attending free webinars. I was watching YouTube videos. I joined a writing group at my library. I'm also pretty active on Instagram. And so I started following writers on Instagram. I attended 2 out-of-state writing retreats. I just really craved being around other writers so that I could create as much accountability as possible. Another thing I've learned over this year is that people make writing a very solitary endeavor. And the longer that you keep other people's eyes away from your work, the more reluctant you're going to be to share it. It's going to feel bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's just a lot of self-doubt when you're writing. I mean, obviously I didn't have any when I finished my book somehow, but I think along the way you think like, gosh, is this just like a pile of trash? And you start to think like, I'm embarrassed to even think about letting someone read this. It's really vulnerable. And so if you can enmesh yourself in a community along the way, I think that was another thing that I think helped me with my process is that I was in critique groups. I was sharing pages almost every week with people. I was opening up my writing world, and some of that was tough because I was getting a lot of really bad feedback. And I look back now, it was such writing 101 feedback. I mean, things that now I look at and they come so easily for me now to not write that way or to recognize it in other people's work. But you have to start somewhere. It's really hard to learn about writing from reading a book about writing because I think like many things, at least for me, I'm someone who learns by doing. And so I think if I had tried to read a stack of books about the craft of writing, it wouldn't have made sense. Like it doesn't make sense until someone is sitting over you being like, do you see how you've written this sentence? Let me tell you a better way to write this sentence. And so, I mean, obviously my advice is not going to work for everyone. I know there's a lot of like lifetime learners out there that want to learn and learn and learn and learn and learn before they do, and good for them. But that is not me. I have to just jump in and start to do it. And so if there are people out there that have that story in their heart that they want to write, just start writing it. I mean, just don't feel like you have to learn or you have to do a class or you have to like reach some level of documented ability before you actually start writing. I feel like what I got is what I'm calling my DIY MFA because I just put in so many hours of learning and practice. And it's really just about the practice. And I didn't need to sit in a creative writing class to do that. I just needed to write. And I needed to share it. So, what started as this goal to write a book has turned into this very rich learning experience and immersion into the world of writing. And along the way, this is kind of this unexpected thing. I found that I have a knack for helping other people, other writers bring their ideas to life and helping them stay motivated to write their own books and finish their own books. So now I am not only writing books, but I'm also doing book coaching and I'm hosting writing retreats.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
So cool. And I've seen some of your photos on Instagram, and we're going to link all of Kym's socials in the show notes below. But it's so cool to see, you had these groups of writers together to get creative, to probably to your point of, have some accountability and just to have like-minded people who all have this goal of wanting to create something. And there you are together just, in a location and just kind of making it fun though. Of these little I don't say little, but these writing retreats. How cool is that? Like it's such a great concept.
It's great. And I just think pushing past that vulnerability and actually connecting with other people, you'll just find it's the same. Most authors are struggling with the same things. They have the same doubts. They are having the same problems with their manuscripts. And so to be able to actually, the more that you can help other people, the more you learn how to do it yourself. I don't know if you have found that, but like when I teach someone, that's when I'm learning the most.
That's a really good point. And I love that you say too, that if this, and I think this can apply to other things in life too, but if there's something that you want to do, You said don't worry about trying to learn all the things. Like, just get started. Let the ideas just come out, because what is that? Is it analysis paralysis? I think is a saying, where you almost have too much information and then you just kind of don't even know where to go. So,
well, and that's just it. If I had learned like what it takes to write a good book, I would have been like, I don't know how to do any of those things. And so like, why even try? Because I can't achieve to that level. It's like if you brought in like a Rembrandt and you're like, this is how Rembrandt painted. And you're like, well, I will never be, I'm barely sketching. I don't even know how to use my pencils. I don't even know how to use acrylics. Like, I mean, it's like, you have to just start somewhere. You have to like finger paint before you can be a great artist.
I love that. And that can apply to so many things in life.
Absolutely.
Like, that's a life lesson in itself. Like,
Definitely.
that is good advice. That is awesome. So with your book, I mean, how close are we at this point to actually getting to read it?
Okay, well, I love the question because I can't wait for you to read it. But, okay, I am going to refrain from going too deep here because this is one of the things that I have learned a lot about. But there's basically two ways to publish a book. The first path is that you can self-publish. So you can, write a book and get it edited and pay maybe to have an editor, a copy editor, and all those things. You can design your own cover. You can lay out the pages, 100 other little steps, and then you can put it on Amazon and they will print it on demand. Basically, you can also buy a bunch of copies and like have them delivered to your home. But then you have to do your own marketing and your own PR. It's really very hard to find commercial success this way. And so you'll see a lot of books, like the books that are on like Kindle Unlimited, are oftentimes self-published authors because like they're just trying to get their work out there. They're trying to get their books read. They're trying to get ratings on Amazon, those kinds of things. But it is slow going. The other path is traditional publishing, and that means you have to find a literary agent who will sell your book to a publisher. And this process of getting an agent is called querying. And it's basically like applying for a job where you have to have like a cover letter and a resume. And then, it isn't called that in this world, but I think that's a very common experience that we've all had in trying to apply for a job. So you send these things along with your pages, and you basically are just trying to prove to this agent about all the reasons that they should want to represent you. And just to give you an idea of how tough it is to get an agent, about 1% of people who go through the querying process actually end up with representation. So it's like 1 in 100 people who query end up with an agent. So it's not good odds, but I will say that it's also a very small percentage of people who want to write a book who do. So I feel like I've already passed that first threshold. I did write the book. I did do the work to edit and polish and do all those things. And so I'm just going to keep trying to beat the odds. So I started querying about 2 weeks ago, my book, and I am just crossing my fingers that my soulmate agent is out there. And then, so to answer your question, when I get an agent, not if, when I get an agent, it takes about 18 to 24 months for the book to actually make its way onto the shelf. It is quite a process. I mean, just like even, when a publisher says, yes, I want to buy it. And then it takes like 3 or 4 months to get the contract. And then you get assigned an editor, and then you work with that editor and you do several rounds of revisions, and then you're designing the cover, and then you're making, 100 different decisions. And publishing is a very, very, very slow business.
Mm-hmm. So patience is key here, right?
Yeah. And I will say that is not a word that I use to describe myself in general.
And maybe a good supportive circle, right? Like good friends, people to kind of keep you going and keep you thinking positive thoughts. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. I had no idea. That's a lot longer than I thought.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. So think about that. Like you do get paid a little bit. So at best case scenario, if you get an agent, they sell your book, you get a publisher, you get an advance. So that's like the money where basically they say, we're going to give you this money ahead of time because we think your book is going to sell at least this many copies or whatever. And this can be like, I think we hear when you're in this world a little bit, you hear about these like amazing success stories where people are getting 6 and 7 figure advances, but that's like, Oprah, like that's who's getting those 7-figure advances. Most debut authors are getting like $10,000. And then you're not actually getting that. You get it in increments. Like you might get 25% of that when you sign the contract, and then 25% when you turn your first draft in, and then like, so it's like you're getting $10,000 over 18 months.
Wow.
And then hopefully your book will actually sell enough copies that you sell at your advance and actually start making royalties. But most authors do not sell out their advances, which is pretty wild.
Do you have to pay that back? Like,
no. You don't have to pay that back. So what your publisher hopes is that you'll continue to write books, you'll continue to gain popularity, And then, usually it's by an author's third or fourth book that they actually start getting some notoriety. And then your audience will start to go back and buy the books that you previously published. So it's really a long game kind of career.
Wow. Now, okay, so I have a question here. Obviously I have several, but
Sorry, I thought I was going to keep it simple, and then I went probably like 10 layers too deep.
This is great. And I think there's so many people that are going to be fascinated because
I have been fascinated.
Yeah. I mean, this is just a whole process that, until you're in this world and in this space like you are, you wouldn't know how this stuff works. So I think this is super cool. So thinking about the gap year, and I'm thinking about how this was an interest of yours since you were a teenager. Now, did you know it was going to be this lengthy of a process? And if you did or didn't, because my first thought here is you were planning on only taking a 1 year, to write your book and do all the other things. But now that this might take a little bit longer, like is panic setting in? And I'm just curious, like is panic setting in?
Yeah, fair question.
Right? Like I know we have some other questions to get to, but
no, it's a totally fair question.
Mindset there.
Well, I had longer than a year. I mean, I sort of dubbed it my midlife gap year, but I had longer than that. I mean, I had actually a couple of years of money saved. And then also we just really very much changed our lifestyle too, so that we just weren't spending as much as we used to. Another just random detail to throw in there too is that we have a property that we bought that we use as an investment property. We use it as like an Airbnb. And we had a property manager that was managing that. And so I have since taken over the management of that property. So now it's like we kind of get some more passive income too. So some other things are shifting with our finances. But then that's where, this book coaching and writing retreats are coming in, is that now I actually am getting not nearly as much as I made as in corporate America, but I am getting some money coming in. So just trying to stretch our budget as far as possible.
Yeah. But to your point too, you brought up COVID, or not COVID, but the pandemic, and we did learn, or a lot of us did learn, to live more simply or not need as much. So it's a good reminder too that sometimes we do have so much stuff, and I always talk a lot about social media on the podcast, but there's so many products that are being kind of forced down our feeds, and all these things we feel like we have to buy and consume, and it's we really don't need all that stuff anyway. So
no, we don't. I'm just in general, I'm not really a buyer when I go buy clothes. I go to the thrift store. There's a group, I guarantee you, listener, there is a group like this in your community. It's called Buy Nothing. And there are these little micro groups that you can find on Facebook. And it's just several hundred people that live in a proximity in your community. And it's people post things all the time that they want to get rid of. And it's good stuff. Someone's just I don't need these pans anymore. Does anyone want them? And it's I need pans. I'll take them. So if you don't mind getting used things, which I do not. And also I love giving things away. Oh my gosh, you can just ask my family. They make such fun of me. Someone will be like, I'm going to throw this away. And I'm like, somebody wants that. We don't want that to sit in the landfill. And so I put it on my Buy Nothing group. And okay, let me tell you, we had these chairs break at our short-term rental property. And they were not great chairs. They were IKEA to begin with, but they kind of slowly started to get sort of ganky. And so we took them off the property and put new chairs up there. 3 of them were legitimately broken, wood split broken. And, my family's okay, let's throw these away. And I was like, somebody wants them. And I posted them on this Buy Nothing group. And within 5 minutes, they were picked up. So, okay, I'm sorry. I just went off on such a tangent. But yes, to your point. We don't need to buy a lot of things. And honestly, a lot of the things that we want can be received in other ways.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, it's funny you say that because I either try to sell my clothes at a Plato's Closet or Poshmark. Mm-hmm. But gosh, you're right there. I mean, if you have stuff, because I like to purge. There's something so cleansing about just getting rid of the clutter. So, and if you can make a couple dollars, cool. And if you can't, at least it's out of your, it's one less thing you have to do, right? You don't have to bring it to wherever, it's just to your point, somebody else can use it. It's a benefit to them. So it's a win-win. I love that.
So I do think, a lot of that I've always been a little bit like that, but I really leaned into that over this time of saving and living this new lifestyle of just, ruthlessly prioritizing what are the things that I'm willing to spend money on.
And I love how you just said that. Yeah, prioritizing, because what were you prioritizing? Your gap year and what your goals were. And it wasn't about buying and spending money frivolously. It was about what you actually took this time to do. So I like that. So you're basically just doing anything you could to support what your goal was, what your priorities were.
That's right.
Love it. I love it. So let me go back to actually something that you shared on social media. And I had made a comment before about, as you're realizing how much longer this process was and needing a supportive circle, good friends, and all that good stuff. But you did decide to share something kind of personal on social media about a shift in your own family dynamic. And I'm just more curious about when you went through something that was possibly unexpected that, it can make you feel like, oh gosh, should I end this gap year? And all these priorities that you do have, is everything going to shift with it? And did it cause panic too? I think you know where I'm going with this. So I'm going to let you answer that. But I'm curious, when you went through this big shift, what were you thinking and how did you get through it?
Okay, listeners, Lexy is talking about that I announced that my husband and I were getting a divorce. And yes, that was the very unexpected turn of the year. I didn't really see that coming. And the story with he and I is also a little bit unconventional, I think. When I started my gap year, he and I, his name's Mike, we had been married for 22 years. And I got married very young. We started dating when I was 19. I got married when I was 21. And we are two very calm, level-headed, easy to be around people. And that's just the kind of marriage that we've always had too. Just really like cool and calm. And not to say we never disagree, but like we don't fight. We don't raise our voices. We're very kind to one another. It's just, I've been very lucky to have a partner who is just, he's just so level. He's so level. Mm-hmm. And much like my job during COVID, I was just really questioning everything. I was at this time in my life where I was allowing myself to just ask, do I still like this situation that I'm in? When you're so deeply entrenched into any path, whether it's a relationship or a job or a friendship, you sort of just keep going. It's much easier to keep going. Yeah. And when I asked that question for my marriage, do I still like this situation again? The answer was no. And, it's interesting because I'm at a time of my life, I'm in my early 40s, where a lot of my friends are getting divorced. And I would say most of them are contentious. And for us, there just wasn't an event. We don't fight. No one cheated. It's just so easy when you're in something like that just to keep going.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation with my guest, Kym. Isn't it interesting all about her midlife gap year? Well, she's coming back on the podcast next week to finish this conversation. And she really opens up and shares a lot with us. So make sure you come back next week so you can hear all that she has to say. To be part of the exclusive listener group, hit the follow button on whichever podcast platform you're listening to right now. When you follow, you'll be the first to know about new episodes so you can listen before anyone else. You'll also have quick access to the show, making it convenient to find for the next time. For more free content, join me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and online at peaceofmepodcast.com.